My name is Melinda Beezer. I am a 37-year-old mother of 2 girls, and I'm going to be talking about 2 forms of child abuse. I know there's a wealth of information out there on the market. I'm not a doctor, psychiatrist, or anything of that nature. Just want to say that up front. I don't have any credentials, not an expert in the field. My experience or my knowledge comes from being a victim of a pedophile. My father, in fact, is a pedophile who has been abusing kids for over 20 years now, I would say. And I thought that by sharing my story, and I will warn you right up front that a lot of it's going to seem absurd and absolutely ridiculous in a lot of cases. But I can tell you that everything that you see here or hear from me is based on actual facts and occurrences. My family, I had the misfortune. I was not only raised by a pedophile, but I also had an abusive mother. So I kind of got hit on 2 different fronts. And it proved to be a very difficult situation because I really had no lifeline. I had 2 abusers for parents, and as we go into my story a little bit further, you'll get to see my life and the isolation of my life. This is my first video, so it's going to be a little bit rough in places, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to have to break this up into segments because there's a standing rule you can't do more than 15 minutes on YouTube. So this is going to be a series of short clips. This one that you're watching now is going to be part 1. As I said, we're going to be discussing child abuse. 2 different forms of child abuse we'll be discussing. We will be discussing child sex abuse, and we will be discussing actually 3 different forms. I apologize, obviously I haven't written this out very well. We will be discussing child sex abuse, we will be discussing physical abuse, and we will be discussing verbal abuse. I kind of got hit on 3 fronts. So, I'll start out with my background. I am a farm girl. My family owns a farm outside of La Crosse, Washington, a 2,200 acre farm. That farm has been in our family for 5 generations. My great-great-grandparents actually settled, were some of the first people to settle in that area around La Crosse. I was raised in a small town with good old-fashioned family values. All the basic family values at La Crosse. People still help each other. People know each other there. All the traditional small town values were there. My childhood, my early childhood that I remember was normal. Other than the fact that I grew up on an isolated farm, so I didn't have any friends or anything to play with. My playmates happened to be the family's herd of sheep. I played with them. So it was pretty isolated out there. I don't have any really disturbing memories of my early childhood, at least in regards to my dad. My mother, her forte was basically verbal abuse, was mainly her main one, and she could be physically abusive as well. In my early childhood, it wasn't so much. I mean, what I remember of my mom was that she was a really hard worker, and she worked constantly. We had a pristine house. We had a pristine yard. Even the barn where the animals were kept clean. Everything was pristine. Everything was orderly. My mom worked constantly because living in a farm country off of gravel road, there was a ton of dirt. And keeping a house dust-free in an area like that is really next to impossible, but she managed to do it. So she was always working. I don't really have any memories of my mom. You know, I don't remember her playing with me when I was a kid. I don't remember wrestling with her or doing any of the things I do with my kids. She was just always there in the background working. And that was basically the course of my life as regards to my mother. Like I said, my early childhood was basically pretty normal. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. My parents had me for 4 years, or 4 years after I was born. My sister was born. My earliest memories that I do have, you know, going back further in regards to my sister, the only oddity that stands out from that particular period of time was that my sister didn't want to have anything to do with my dad. From a very young age, she stayed close to my mom at all times. You rarely saw my sister away from my mom. She never wanted anything to do with dad. Now, it should be pointed out that my sister and I are very different. I was a blabberjaws. I talked and talked and talked. If I knew something, the entire world knew about it too. I could not keep a secret. What I knew, everybody else knew, and I never shut up. And so I think probably the fact that I was a complete blabberjaws may have saved me in my early years around my dad, because quite simply, had he done anything to me, everybody in the county probably would have heard about it, because I could not keep my mouth shut for nothing. I mean, you know, I have a little one now. My youngest daughter is the same way. She tells everybody everything. She'll walk up to a stranger in the street and give them her life story. I mean, that's just, you know, our nature. And that little flaw probably protected me in my early years. My sister, on the other hand, was the perfect candidate. She was very shy, and she didn't talk. She rarely spoke. And very quiet, you know, very submissive. You know, she just, you know, was a really shy child. And, you know, as a child, you know, being reared in that environment, I thought that was completely normal. I didn't think anything odd over the fact that she was always with mom and didn't want to have anything to do with dad, or none of that stood out to me. I was a kid. It's not until you look back on your lives with adult eyes that you start to see, I guess, the flags that were there. I think, you know, based on my sister's vague memories, you know, of that time period and stuff, of being in the bathtub with my dad and stuff like that, it's my belief that my dad started violating my sister when she was maybe a toddler or a little bit older than a toddler. I think she was probably sexually abused from the time she was a toddler. I've done a considerable amount of research and reading into the situation based on her family and everything. And I know that pedophiles that prey on very young children do so anally, because it doesn't leave the evidence. If you mess around with a child's groin region, it's going to get red and it's going to draw attention. Whereas by abusing a child or penetrating a child anally, you know, if a mother sees a red puckered, you know, butthole, you know, most of the time they're going to assume it's constipation. And that's the case with my mom. If she noticed my sister having a slightly red bum, you know, it was just constipation. The kid needed more fruit. And that was the assumption on what my mom decided. And I believe that my dad was able to abuse her in this manner for quite a few years. I don't know how many times he abused her, how long it lasted. I know that my sister stayed close to my mom, so I don't think that he had a lot of opportunity, because my sister really never left my mom's side, so his chances of getting at her wouldn't have been very often. Because children that are abused before the age of 6, a part of that is that they don't remember anything. Children abused, you know, below the age of 6, they don't remember the abuse. My sister has just vague memories. She doesn't really remember it. I was, I guess, unfortunate or more fortunate in the fact that my abuse happened later. So I think right now, basically my abuse, I guess we can move on to my abuse. How it went down with me, first of all, my sister caught a lucky break when I was just barely 12 years of age. My parents separated, and my mom moved away. And my mom, before she left my dad, asked me, which parent I wanted to live with. I was 12 by then, and she thought I was old enough to decide where I wanted to live, and she gave me the choice. And I was really close with my dad. I was pals with him. I followed him everywhere. I loved the farm. I loved life on the farm. I loved my animals. I was just absolutely in love with farm life, and crazy about my dad. And so I chose to stay with my dad when my mom left. So she took my brother and my sister, and one day while I was at school, she left. And I came home to an empty house, and it was at this time that my dad's destructive nature started to make itself apparent. The first sign of my dad's destructive nature came in his spending sprees. As soon as my mom was gone, my dad went on a spending spree. He drugged me up to Spokane, and he spent a huge amount of money on one weekend. He decided, he always wanted a waterbed. Well, my mom wouldn't let him get one. So he went out and bought us waterbeds. And he bought, this furniture and stuff like that. And I remember being very concerned about the amount of money that was spent in one weekend. And part of that was due to the fact that while my parents were married, my mom was a complete control freak. And that is another thing that should be clarified. My mom ran the household when her and my dad were married. My dad didn't get to touch the money. He was maybe given, a little bit of an allowance, but money decisions, the handling of money, the paying of bills, everything like that was done by my mom, and she ran it with an iron fist. My mom is a control freak, and she controlled everything around her. And I believe in a lot of ways that was belittling to my dad, but he couldn't stand up to my mom. He was scared of my mom. He didn't have the personality or confrontational personality to stand up, which may have led him into the pursuit of children. I don't know. But anyway, my mom, Catherine, was lucky enough that my mom did get her out of there at a young age, and get her away from my dad, and they separated. And that in itself at least saved Catherine from further abuse. And because she was so young, like I said, she only has very vague memories of the abuse. And so that's, at least been healthy for her, although that wasn't the end of the story. And that's going to conclude my part 1 of this series. Be sure to check out my other videos, as we will be going into more detail on part 2. Thank you.